fading memory so I can breathe again. Gain our trust and you chose to break it. Ask for truth but you only fake it. Thought you said what we had was sacred. It's all lies, all lies. I was broken and isolated, but inside held the fire waiting. Not a word that you say can save this, so don't try. 'Cause this time you crossed the line. Looking for a better place, not to stay alone.
Yo, what's good folks? It's KnightmareFrame here with a new Warframe video. Here talking about the new Warframe GYRE. GYRE is all about the electrical elements. Is she a really good frame? Yes, she's really fun to play, but she does lack a few things that can make her a bit annoying in certain missions. We'll get to that. And is she worth picking up? Absolutely. You gotta, it's Warframe. You gotta have everything in the game. All right, let's go over her passive. GYRE's passive grants her abilities a 10% chance to deal critical damage for each electric status effect stack that affects the enemy. And now her abilities. When cast, the first ability, Arc Sphere, will deal the initial AoE electrical damage and begin to deal electrical damage over time as it's present on the field. You can have a maximum of 3 of the Arc Spheres present at a time. The electrical DOT stun is very inconsistent the more the enemies get to the outer sphere, and it looks like the damage and CC triggers when one of the tendril hits an enemy, and only one can hit the enemy at a time. Almost like Mirage's 4th ability. The CC is more consistent towards the center of the ability as more of the tendrils are gathered in a tighter point. And as the targets in the center get stunned or procced with the electrical DOT, only then will it spread to the closest target, like how electrical procs work. All in all, an underwhelming ability, and unfortunately you can't spam to have more than 3 of these to have a better lockdown of rooms and enemies. Her second ability, Coil Horizon, is one of the best crowd control abilities, and also one with the most messed up physics. You can toss this orb, it bounces and then detonates to pull in enemies and deal electrical damage over time. Or you can double tap to prematurely detonate and pull in enemies to deal damage right away. You cannot properly aim this ability, as in if you look up and cast, it will still move forward, but not upwards. And it bounces off enemies and obstacles and may end up behind you for some reason. It's pretty much like a beach ball. It's really inconsistent and you need to aim it in a cleaner open spot for the enemies to be pulled in properly. Her third ability, Cathode Grace, is what makes GYRE unique. When cast, Cathode gives you energy regen per second and allows her own abilities to crit. Note that I mentioned her own, meaning this does not affect Helminth abilities, so throw that out the window. This also applies to her weapons, and the buff remains active with increased duration if you keep up with kills. Now, this is what makes and breaks GYRE. She needs a lot of enemies to maintain this buff and function. So if the map is barren and the ability is active without any enemies, it goes on a 60-second cooldown, and now she is just useless. At the same time, she lacks survivability. So if she is swarmed and you can't do anything about it, well, you're screwed. The crit buff on abilities is a flat increase, like Arcane Avenger, and for weapons it works like a multiplier, as in a point strike. Finally, her 4th ability, Rotor Swell. A very simple yet strong ability. She overcharges herself and deals AoE electrical damage, and if she lands a crit from her abilities or weapons, she discharges electrical damage around her. The downside to this ability is that after the discharge occurs, it goes on an internal cooldown before another discharge can happen. Rotor Swell synergizes really well with her passive and third ability and making her electrical DOT abilities do better DPS. Alright, now that you have an understanding of how her abilities work, let's take a look at some builds. And for those asking for fashion, well, it's default. Yeah. And remember, I did mention that Gyre lacks a lot of survivability. Why? Is because, first of all, she has way too many shields. Having too many shields is actually bad for you for certain warframes. For Hildren and Harrow, frames that use shields as a resource, that's a completely different story. But for frames who rely on other things to survive, well, having too many shields is actually really bad. Even with the Decaying Dragon Key, she still has 131 shields. Now, if you don't know anything about shield gaining, you want as little shields as possible, because once they break, you get that brief moment of damage prevention to anything that goes into your health, except Toxin. The lower the shields, the sooner they recharge, especially if you use things like Brief Respite, Augur mods, just so you can get another instance of that damage prevention. If you want to know more about shield gating, do go check out my shield gating guide. It's very short, simple, straight to the point. And because her first ability is pretty much not that reliable, I did replace it, and here I'm using Shooting Gallery. Shooting Gallery is Mesa's second ability. It's an AoE stun that jams enemies' weapons. And if you use the Augment Muzzle Flash, killing 6 enemies, whether it's an assist or whatever, as long as you kill 6 enemies, you can trigger an AoE Burst Blind effect. This blind does not even consider line of sight, it's just AoE blind. So let's take a look at the build.
No matter how good the CC is on the frame, we always want another layer of survivability. So for this reason, I'm slotting Rolling Guard and Brief Respite on Gyre. This is also
I didn't watch the video. Remember, I had this build ready from Gauss. I had this build ready. Just saying. In the aura, I have Brief Respite. This mod allows me to convert energy spent into shields. So for example, if my shields break, I cast 1 or 2 abilities, I get my shields back. And we're going to be pairing this up with the Augur set, which will give me shields and overshields. Prime Sure-Footed for that knockdown resistance and stagger immunity. If you do not have this, you can use Handspring or Pain Threshold. Duration at 128% because of Transient Fortitude and Prime Continuity. Without Transient, I will get 155, but we do need the Power Strength, and we also need Efficiency, because she is an ability spam Warframe. Range at 175% with Stretch and Augur Reach. This brings all of my abilities up, especially Coil Horizon, giving it a 21 meter explosion radius, and brings up Rotoswell to 17 meters. Power Strength at 199% with Transient Fortitude and Umbral Intensify. I will be getting 40% more Power Strength with the Focus School Madurai. We'll get to that. Rolling Guard for that 3 seconds of invulnerability and status cleansing. And in the arcane slots, I do have Energize and Eruption. Both of these trigger upon energy pickup. Energize grants you that energy regen, while Eruption will CC enemies around you. But this is a flex arcane. You can replace this with anything else. I like to use fire rate arcanes like Arcane Tempo, Acceleration, depending on the weapon I'm using. However, if you're just chilling and want to use your abilities more, I would suggest Eruption. Now, you may have noticed I am not using Natural Talent. Gyre is one of those frames that has an annoying casting speed, like Mirage and Necros. That's her third ability. That's her fourth ability. They all have a very long animation. DE loves long animations. And how to counteract that, you just go in and out of your Warframe to get that Natural Talent buff. And to get that additional 40% power strength, you go into her operator, Void Dash a couple of times, and this will give you that increase to all your abilities. In terms of weapons, you can use pretty much whatever, but I would like weapons that actually can proc electricity. So you can take your pick. You got yourself the Amprax, Phantasma. Phantasma is actually really disgusting with Gyre, believe it or not. And here you go. Cast your second ability, pull them in. Pretty clean. Phantasma was a great choice, but the reason I took Babonico, well, for one, it can have viral, corrosive, and electricity with just one mod. Oh yeah. And the great thing is about having corrosive is because you can get rid of acolytes fairly quickly. Let's take a look at the build. Over here, I have my corrosive, viral, and electric Bubonico. Now, how does it do all of these elements with just one mod? It's fairly simple. The alternate fire has viral procs, and it will proc the modded element on top of that. For example, that electrical mod, there you go, you got viral and electric with just one alternate fire shot, while the primary fire has base toxin and it will combine with the modded element electric, and that will give you corrosive. Very amazing weapon. Do not underestimate it. Now, my base damage is coming from the primary Merciless Arcane. With 12 stacks, I get 360% base damage. This base damage is going to be way stronger than running a point blank, and there won't be any point running a point blank with this unless you're doing star chart, because star chart doesn't matter. So my faction mod here is Prime Cleanse of Grineer, since I'll be fighting against Grineer or any other faction. Multi-shot, crit chance, crit damage, fire rate, and even more crit damage. This right here is a flex slot. You can replace this with whatever you want. Since I'm getting a lot of crit chance with Gyre, hey, why not add a bit more crit damage? And Galvanized Savvy, with all those status effects on the enemies, I'm going to be doing a lot of damage. And our elemental mod, which is Prime Charge Shell, which is a massive increase in damage. And since Bubonico doesn't have any issues with ammo, well, boom, put a galvanized acceleration. Another interesting thing you can do is, instead of running shrapnel shot, you can increase the magazine capacity. But unfortunately, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. You know what? Fuck it. More magazine. I would say more magazine is way better DPS. And on to our Epitaph, which is going to be our alternate primer. Now, usually you would see viral and electric, but since we already have electric on the Bubonico, I thought, there was no point to put electric on here. And if you did apply this on the enemies, they will take a bit more damage since their armor is getting reduced with the heat procs. And you're getting other sources of electric on enemies, so there was no point to overload too much electricity. It has the 2 multi-shot mods. The barrel diffusion gives that a slight increase in the dodge speed, and reflex straw just for the swap speed. Very important to have. And of course dexterity for even more swap speed. So for example, if I do swap to the pistol, I can swap back to the primary fairly quickly. It would be a lot more beneficial if you ran double dexterity, but it's not that noticeable if you're just using your abilities quite a lot and your weapons as additional damage. And for the melee, why not go with the electrical theme? And here I have the Ninkandi Prime, and it's a fairly simple melee build with additional electricity. We will be getting our viral procs from our pet and utility weapon, which is our Epitaph. In terms of focus, I'll be running Madurai. If you didn't know, focus schools have all been reworked, so Madurai is now useful outside of Eidolons as well. The 2 main things here are going to be the additional casting speed and bonus power strength after void slinging. Power transfer. Going in and out of your Warframe will grant you additional casting speed and other benefits. And sling strength. Switching to your Warframe after chain slings adds 40% power strength for 20 seconds. And for the pets, well, the Panzerwurzelpfeiler, because why not? It's free viral procs and it doesn't die. Well, it does die, but it, revives itself fairly quickly. The build, I'm pretty sure you've seen this build in many other videos. Oh, look, it's the same one. Wow. And in the gear wheel, make sure you have your Decaying Dragon Key just to reduce the shield capacity. Okay, now there are a few alternatives to Helminth abilities. Since we have 1 free slot, depending if you're going to use an augment or not, you can run Roar, which will multiply your abilities damage and double dip with DOTs. And since your abilities deal DOTs, well, hey, look at that. Even more damage for your abilities. But this will get rid of that survivability. For even more survivability, you can run Resonator, Pillage to strip the shields, so your electrical abilities can deal even more damage. Shock Trooper can provide you an electrical damage buff when you equip the augment mod, Shock Trooper, allowing all of your weapons to deal electrical damage. So that means you don't have to pick an electric specific weapon. Zata's Whisper, very powerful. Alright folks, that has been it from this video. If you've enjoyed and learned something from it, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.